Never thought one day could change the way I saw my family forever. Graduation was supposed to be one of the happiest moments of my life, a day I'd remember with pride and love. But instead, it became the day I realized I was never really seen the same way as my twin sister, Emma. That moment when I stood there holding a $10 gift card while she screamed in excitement over a trip to Europe, that's when everything inside me cracked. I remember the sun being so bright that day. My gown was sticking to my skin, my heart racing with excitement. I looked over and saw my parents beaming with pride. For a second, I felt safe. I thought, maybe all the late night studying, the stress, the loneliness, it was finally worth it. Emma stood next to me, her smile wide, her curls bouncing, the crowd cheering her name. She's always been the loud one, the social butterfly. I've always been the quiet twin, the one who listens more than she speaks. When the ceremony ended, we gathered in the garden for photos. Our parents were holding 2 envelopes. I didn't think much of it. I figured maybe it was something small, maybe a symbolic gift. Emma opened hers first. I still remember how her eyes widened, her hands covering her mouth as she gasped. "A trip to Europe," she screamed. "Mom, Dad, are you serious?" Everyone laughed, clapped, took pictures. I smiled too, because that's what I always do. Then Mom turned to me. "And here's yours, honey," she said with that same soft smile she always uses when she doesn't want me to ask questions. I opened it, trying to act calm, but when I saw what was inside, a $10 gift card to a coffee shop, I froze. For a second, I thought it was a joke. I looked up, expecting someone to laugh and say, "Gotcha." But no one did. They just waited for me to react, as if this was perfectly normal. I forced a smile and whispered, "Thanks." My voice cracked a little, but nobody noticed. Everyone was too busy taking pictures with Emma, planning her trip, talking about which cities she'd visit. I stood there, holding that tiny piece of plastic, feeling smaller than I ever had before. The whole ride home, they talked about her Europe plans. "You'll love Paris," Mom said. "And we should get you a new suitcase," Dad added. I stared out the window, clutching my gift card like it might suddenly transform into something else. I kept asking myself, what did I do wrong? That night, I lay awake thinking about all the little moments that suddenly made sense now. The times Emma got new clothes while I was told to wait for sales. The times they showed up to her soccer games but missed my art shows. The times they introduced her as our brilliant one, and me as the quiet one. I used to brush it off, telling myself they just didn't realize how it felt. But after that day, I couldn't ignore it anymore. I didn't confront them. Not that night. I couldn't. I was afraid of sounding ungrateful, afraid they'd tell me I was overreacting. So instead, I smiled the next morning like nothing was wrong. I told Emma to send pictures from Europe. She hugged me tight and said, "You're the best sister ever." I wanted to believe her, but part of me ached because deep down, I knew I'd never get a hug like that from our parents. Days passed, and I tried to distract myself. I worked extra shifts at my part-time job, bought sketch supplies, painted until my hands hurt. But every time I saw a photo Emma posted from Europe, something inside me twisted. She looked happy. Truly happy. And I wanted to be happy for her, I really did. But it hurt. It hurt that our parents could spend thousands on her and think $10 was enough for me. I finally broke down one evening when my best friend Lily came over. She found me sitting in the corner of my room, staring at that gift card on my desk. "What's wrong?" she asked. And before I knew it, I told her everything. She didn't interrupt. She just listened. When I finished, she said softly, "You know, sometimes families love unevenly. But that doesn't mean you're less worthy." Her words hit me hard. Maybe it wasn't about money. Maybe it was about how they saw me. Maybe they didn't think I needed grand gestures. Maybe they thought I'd be fine with less. But that didn't make it right. A week later, Emma returned from Europe, glowing with stories. She had gifts for everyone, bracelets, magnets, chocolates. When she handed me a little Eiffel Tower keychain, she said, "This reminded me of you." I smiled, but inside, I felt hollow. She had an entire world given to her, and I had a plastic tower that jingled when I moved. At dinner that night, Mom kept asking Emma to tell more stories about Paris and Rome. I sat quietly, poking at my food. Finally, I said, "Mom, can I ask something?" She looked up, surprised. "Why did you give me just a $10 card when Emma got a whole trip?" The room went silent. Dad sighed, put down his fork, and said, "Sweetheart, you're different. Emma's been under so much pressure. We wanted to reward her for all she's been through." My throat tightened. "And I haven't been through anything?" I asked. Mom shook her head. "You're strong. You don't need much to be happy." That sentence broke me more than anything else. Because in that moment, I realized they didn't even see me as someone who could need something. To them, my silence meant contentment. My independence meant I didn't deserve attention. I excused myself from the table, went to my room, and cried harder than I ever had. It wasn't about the money. It was about being invisible. About always being the one who clapped for others but never got clapped for. That night, I made a decision. If they wouldn't see my worth, I'd show it to myself. I started applying for art internships, saving every dollar from my job, determined to build something of my own. I didn't want pity. I wanted purpose. And maybe, someday, I'd buy my own ticket to Europe, not to prove them wrong, but to prove to myself that I was always enough. Weeks passed, but the silence between me and my parents grew louder than ever. We talked, but never really spoke. Every word felt heavy, every smile forced. Emma, on the other hand, seemed to glow brighter with every passing day. She'd tell stories about sunsets in Santorini, gondola rides in Venice, and street artists in Paris. She didn't mean to hurt me, she just didn't see the wound she was walking over. I started avoiding family dinners. I'd tell them I had extra shifts or that I was busy working on my portfolio. The truth was, I just couldn't stand sitting there, pretending everything was fine. Pretending that a $10 card didn't feel like a message written in silence, "You don't matter as much." One night, while scrolling through my phone, I found a post from Emma. It was a photo of her and my parents smiling at a fancy restaurant, captioned, "Family time, celebrating my big opportunities ahead." My chest tightened. I wasn't invited. Again. I didn't even know they were out. It felt like watching your own life from behind a locked window. I threw my phone on the bed and just sat there. I tried to tell myself I didn't care, that I was better off focusing on my own dreams. But deep down, it hurt more than I could admit. That photo felt like proof that I'd quietly been erased from the picture. The next morning, I woke up early and took a walk to clear my head. I stopped by that same coffee shop from the gift card. I stared at the balance, still untouched. $10. I ordered a small latte and sat near the window, watching people come and go. Then I saw something that made me smile for the first time in weeks, a little girl showing her mom a crayon drawing she'd made. The mom hugged her so tightly, like that piece of paper was the most precious thing in the world. And in that moment, something clicked inside me. I couldn't make my parents love me the way I wanted. But I could still love myself that way. I could still see my own worth even if they didn't. So I went home and opened my laptop. I created a small online page for my artwork. I started uploading my sketches, my paintings, my emotions turned into colors. It was terrifying, but it felt like breathing again. For the first time, I wasn't waiting for validation. I was creating it. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened. One of my pieces, a painting of two girls standing side by side, one in light and one in shadow, went viral. People connected with it deeply. Comments poured in from strangers saying they felt the same, that they too had been the invisible child. Reading those words made me cry, but this time it wasn't out of pain, it was relief. I wasn't alone. Emma saw the post and immediately came to my room. "Wow, this is amazing," she said, genuinely smiling. "You're finally getting the recognition you deserve." I smiled faintly and said, "Thanks." For a second, it felt like the gap between us shrank just a little. A few days later, Mom knocked on my door. She had that nervous look she always gets when she's unsure how to start. "Honey," she said softly, "your dad and I saw your painting. It's beautiful. We didn't know you felt that way." I didn't know how to respond. All the anger, the resentment, it was still there, sitting in my chest. "You never asked," I said quietly. She looked down. "You're right," she admitted. "We thought you were okay because you never complained. We thought we didn't need to worry." Tears filled my eyes. "That's the problem," I whispered. "You assumed silence meant strength. But it was loneliness." She nodded, her eyes glistening. "I'm sorry," she said. "We failed to see how deeply you felt things." For the first time, her words felt real. Not like the soft apologies people say just to move on, but like she actually meant them. Later that night, Dad came into my room. He looked uncomfortable, like he didn't know where to start. "I owe you an apology too," he said. "We thought we were being fair. Emma's always been expressive. You were always quiet. We thought giving her something big would lift her up. We didn't realize it would push you down." I nodded slowly. "It's not about Europe, Dad. It's about feeling seen. Feeling like I matter too." He exhaled and sat beside me. "You do. More than you know. We just didn't show it right." We sat in silence for a while. It wasn't perfect, but it was a start. The next day, Mom came to my room with an envelope. My stomach twisted. "What's this?" I asked. She smiled gently. "No trips. No gift cards. Just something we should have said a long time ago." Inside was a letter. It wasn't fancy or long, just a few handwritten lines. It said, "We're proud of you, not because you're strong, but because you never stopped being kind, even when life wasn't fair. We love you. We're sorry we didn't show it sooner." I stared at those words for a long time. They didn't erase the pain, but they softened it. I folded the letter and placed it beside my easel. It became my reminder that healing isn't about getting even, it's about getting peace. But the story didn't end there. Because life, I've learned, has a funny way of circling back. Months later, Emma and I were invited to a local art exhibition where my viral painting was being featured. She insisted on coming early with me. As we stood in front of the piece, the two girls in light and shadow, she whispered, "You know, I used to be jealous of you." I turned to her, shocked. "Jealous? Of me?" She nodded. "You always seemed so sure of yourself. Like you didn't need anyone's approval. Mom and Dad were always worried about me, but you had this calm strength. I guess we both misunderstood each other." Her words hit deep. Maybe all this time, we were both trapped in the same illusion, that the other one had it easier. Maybe we were just two halves of a story that never learned to meet in the middle. That night, as we walked home, I realized something. Families aren't perfect. They don't always get it right. But sometimes, it takes breaking apart to learn how to come back together. And even though I'll never forget that day at graduation, the $10 card, the sting of being overlooked, I'm thankful for it now. Because that pain pushed me toward something bigger. Toward my art. Toward understanding. Toward myself. When I look back now, I don't see a girl who was forgotten. I see a girl who found her own voice in the silence. A year later, life looked completely different. My art had opened doors I never imagined. I'd been invited to showcase my collection in a small local gallery, and for the first time, people were paying for my work, not just with money, but with emotion, with connection. Every painting told a story I once kept buried. Every brushstroke was a piece of me learning to heal. My parents came to that first exhibition. I didn't know they were coming until I saw them standing at the entrance, holding flowers. Mom's eyes were red, like she'd been crying. Dad just stood there, trying to smile through the guilt he still carried. But I wasn't angry anymore. I'd grown beyond that. I walked up to them, hugged them both, and whispered, "Thank you for being here." And for the first time, I meant it. As the evening went on, people came up to me to share how my paintings made them feel. One woman told me, "Your work helped me forgive my mother." Another man said, "It made me realize I've been ignoring my quiet child for years." Hearing those words filled me with a strange peace. Maybe the pain I went through had a purpose after all, to remind others to love more deeply, to look more carefully. When the event ended, Emma came over, grinning from ear to ear. "You're famous now," she teased. I laughed and said, "Barely. But thank you." She looked at me seriously for a moment, then said, "You deserve this. You really do." And that simple sentence meant more to me than any trip or gift ever could. Later that night, when everyone had left and the lights were dim, I stood in front of my favorite painting, the one of the two girls, the one that started it all. But this time, I saw something new in it. The girl in the shadow didn't look sad anymore. She looked calm. Whole. As if she'd finally made peace with her reflection. I realized that my story wasn't about revenge or resentment, it was about transformation. About learning that sometimes, being overlooked isn't the end of your story, it's just the beginning of your strength. A few weeks later, something unexpected happened again. I got an email from a well-known art foundation offering me a grant to travel and paint abroad. They said they were inspired by my story and wanted to support artists who turned personal pain into purpose. The destination? Europe. I couldn't stop smiling. Life has a way of bringing things full circle when you least expect it. The same trip I'd once watched my sister take, the one that made me feel invisible, was now being offered to me, not as a gift from someone else, but as a reward I'd earned myself. When I told my family, they were speechless. Dad hugged me and said, "Looks like it's your turn." Mom laughed through her tears, "Guess Europe was waiting for you." Even Emma cheered, "Finally. You have to send me a postcard this time." Before I left, I sat alone in my room, holding that same $10 coffee card I'd kept all year. The balance was long gone, but I'd never thrown it away. It reminded me where I came from, what I'd felt, and who I'd become. I slipped it into my sketchbook as a keepsake, a symbol of the day my heart broke and started to rebuild itself. When I arrived in Paris, everything felt surreal. The city was alive with color, music, and movement. I walked along the Seine, sketchbook in hand, breathing in a freedom I'd never known before. I wasn't the forgotten twin anymore. I was just me, an artist, a dreamer, a survivor of quiet pain who learned how to turn that silence into art. One evening, I sat at a cafe, sipping espresso as the Eiffel Tower glittered in the distance. I opened my sketchbook and drew two figures again, two girls standing side by side. But this time, both were bathed in light. No shadows. No distance. Just peace. A waiter noticed my drawing and smiled. "Beautiful," he said. "Are they sisters?" I looked down at the page, smiled softly, and replied, "Yes." They finally found each other. When I returned home months later, everything felt lighter. My parents had changed too. They no longer compared us. They started showing up for my milestones the same way they always had for Emma's. It wasn't perfect, but it was progress, and that was enough for me. Emma and I became closer than ever. We started a small project together, she handled the social media, and I painted. We called it Twin Perspectives, a place where people could share their sibling stories, their moments of pain and growth. It became something beautiful to you, proof that even broken beginnings can create healing for others. Sometimes, I still think about that graduation day, the cheers, the sunlight, the 2 envelopes. It used to feel like a wound I'd never escape. But now, when I replay that memory, I don't feel bitterness. I feel gratitude. Because without that moment, I might never have discovered my own strength, my own worth, my own path. And that's the lesson I carry with me. Sometimes, the things that break you are really just showing you who you're meant to become. Love doesn't always come wrapped in big gestures or expensive trips. Sometimes, it comes later, when people finally see the damage they've done and try to fix it. Life is strange like that. It tests you, pushes you, hurts you, but if you let it, it also rebuilds you. So, if you've ever been the forgotten one, the quiet one, the one who gave more than they got, remember this, your story isn't over. One day, the same pain that made you question your worth will become the reason someone else finds theirs. As I hung my last painting on the wall that year, I smiled and whispered to myself, thank you, for never giving up. Because in the end, I didn't need a trip to Europe to find happiness. I just needed to see that I was always enough, right here, exactly as I am. And maybe, that's the real gift after all.